Hello, it's Ryan from 2minutetennis.net, and in this video, I'm going to analyze Gasquet's one-handed backhand, show you what you should copy and maybe what you shouldn't copy in order to hit your best one-handed backhands. Now make sure you stick around to the end of the video when I go in front of the camera and show you how you can hit your best one-handers. And be sure to follow 12KGP Tennis on YouTube. Their link is in the description below. They were the ones who allowed me to use this video. Now, the first thing you always want to check with your one-handed backhand is the grip. If we can see two good views of his grip. Here's a good one. We can see, well, if we go right to here, this is great. We can see that he has a bit of a trigger finger with his right index finger. That definitely means that not all of his knuckles are on the very top bevel. And in fact, when we get to here, we can see that his index finger knuckle, the base knuckle of his index finger, is on panel number 1, which is the Eastern backhand grip. But his pinky knuckle is slightly off over toward the Continental. So that is, I'm going to show you when I'm in front of the camera what that grip truly looks like. But a lot of players think he has no trigger finger whatsoever and all his fingers are smushed together. They're not. He has a bit of a trigger finger with that right index finger. Again, I'll show you what that is back in front of the camera. So the second thing. Now, the second thing is going to be the turn. So when the ball comes to you on the one-handed backhand, you want to think of the one-handed backhand as being two-handed for really the majority of the time prior to contact. So you're going to take the racket back with both hands. Now, he does something a little stylistic here where his hitting hand is far away from his chest. He actually kind of pushes it away, but what I like is that he actually corrects it here. This is a fantastic correction as a nice kind of detail that you can work on your one-handed backhand. I want you to focus on the relationship of your upper arm, of your hitting arm, and your chest. So since he's right-handed, you can see that his kind of bicep, tricep area is really close to his right pec. And so when he turns initially, there's some space and he has his racket face open. You can see the strings are facing up, but then he actually pulls it in against his body, pulls that right hand in. And now you can see that the racket is very vertical and it's not as open as it was. This is kind of that idea of point your strings to the crowd that I've mentioned with Djokovic's backhand and Federer's forehand when he turns. When you take your racket back on the one-handed backhand and you're changing the grip from your forehand grip to your backhand grip, you want to try to have the racket very vertical in the back with your strings facing to the side. You'll notice his back elbow is up, which means we can actually see his back armpit, where the back armpit is actually exposed to someone standing behind him, as in the camera person right here. When you take your racket back, this is an absolutely fantastic way to take your racket back. I would say, again, stylistically, this is quite high above his head. So that's quite a large swing to have to handle. I would love it if his racket from a learning standpoint, I wouldn't change his backhand, but I would say for you watching this video, if where that line is kind of the top of your racket head. So if your racket head was like this, it won't be so high. So I think it would be a little easier for you to handle that size of a swing. Now, when the racket drops, I want you to notice how it drops with both hands. As I mentioned at the beginning, you want both hands to be on the racket for the vast majority of the time. I know it's called a one-handed backhand, but think of it as two-handed really up until very close to contact. He's taking it back with two hands and he's dropping with two hands. You want both hands on the racket as the racket drops. This absolutely unlocks an amazing amount of control for amateurs looking for the control that they need on their one-handed backhand. When the non-hitting hand drops with the racket, it can help you to close the racket. You'll notice his racket face is closed here. So I've seen in recent videos I've made about closing the racket face, how, do we close the racket face on a one-handed backhand? Yes, you can close the racket face on a forehand, a two-handed backhand, one-handed backhand. And what it does is it helps you be square against the back of the ball when you hit. Now, we don't get to see him square against the back of the ball because the frames per second don't actually catch the contact. But I'll show you this again when I'm in front of the camera. When your strings close prior to contact, they'll face forward when you hit the ball without much manipulation as you hit. Another reason why it's nice to have the left hand drop with the racket is when the left hand drops with the racket, it makes it easier for you to then pull that non-hitting arm back. You see Dimitrov do that all the time, where both hands go apart. Federer, the hands go apart when you're done. And it's easier actually to go backward with that non-hitting hand if it's come forward a bit in front of the pocket with the racket. So he's below the ball, racket face is closed, and now he's going to brush up the back of the ball. Now, he does something pretty interesting, and I'll actually show you this. This is actually the finish that I teach. I teach the Vic Braden, keep the racket to the left of your hand, the strings pointing slightly up when you're done finish. Now, you'll see a lot of pros where the racket, Dimitrov, Federer, not so much Tsitsipas. Tsitsipas kind of finishes the way Gasquet does, where they try to fight it almost and try to keep the racket. I think it's called like the French finish, or I forget what they call it, but the racket staying almost to the left of the hand with the racket face open. This is actually the finish that I prefer my students to use when learning and working on and trying to improve their one-handed backhand. Rather than the racket going way over here with the strings pointing down, to actually keep intact as much as possible that wrist position between the forearm and the racket, because that wrist position right here is actually the wrist position you have when he contacts the ball. Now, I know he moves it here, like I'm not unaware of that. There's a little bit of movement where he's supinating and there's a little bit of turn in that forearm. I get that. But it kind of fights it and gets it back to that position. There's a lot of movement here, so sometimes it can be hard with the weight of the racket to keep the racket to the left side of your hand. But if you finish on your one-hander like this, with the racket actually to the appropriate side of the letter V, meaning that's the letter V. If you actually can keep the racket a bit to the left of your hand when you're done, it's an amazing amount of control and accuracy that you'll gain on that one-hander. Here's a good view of another one. He turns, you can see the racket's open. So right here, you can see that the racket's open. It's kind of reminiscent of the way Nadal takes his racket back on his forehand, where he takes the racket back on the forehand open, but then kind of fixes it as it drops. And you can see Gasquet do that. All of a sudden, he fixes it. Now, this turn right here, I absolutely love. You got the back elbow up, armpit exposed, strings pointing directly off to the side. You could balance a coin on the top edge of the racket. Love it. Absolutely love it. You can see that the right arm is tight in against the body. There's not a lot of space. Now, there was space as he turned, and you can see that with the racket face being open. So that racket's easily open, 25, 30 degrees. But when he begins to drop, or is prepared to drop, he actually fixes it and gets it on edge. And then he drops with both hands. This is typically when you see amateurs, recreational players letting go of the racket. They let go of the racket at the top of the backswing or near the top of the backswing, where the pros will drop both hands with the racket. You'll see his racket closes. So there's a good view of it. Strings are pointing down prior to contact. That's a hallmark of the one-handed backhand when it's a medium height or a low contact. When it's a high contact, I typically don't close the racket face a lot because the swing is more across. I'll be sure to show you one of those. Swings up. There he kind of does that olé, and then the racket goes back to the left side of your hand. Let me actually redraw that with the right tool. There you go. So that's actually the finish I would love for you to try with your one-handed backhand. And if you're a lefty, it's going to be this way. But the racket to the left side of your hand if you're right-handed, and the racket face open. Here's a really good one. There's the correction where the racket's open here, but then he kind of corrects it and gets it on edge. Both hands drop with the racket. Left hand lets go at the left pocket. Beautiful closure of the racket face. Swings up, love it. And again, I understand he's not keeping that angle just after contact, but he kind of fights it and gets it back into that position. That's what I want you to try to do. I want you to try to, when you're done hitting your one-hander, be in this position. And the whole reason here is it keeps as best you can the angle between the racket and the arm. And it's an amazing amount of control that you feel because it lengthens the hitting zone with the time the strings are facing your target. This is a really good one. Love this one. There's the correction of the racket. So you can see the racket is wide open on this. Strings facing up. That isn't ideal on a one-handed backhand. But you can see he kind of corrects it. And now the strings are facing more to the side. So that's a great correction. Dropping with both hands. Racket face is slightly closed. Swings up. You can see the hands go apart, keeping the body sideways. There's that racket to the left side of the hand. Try not to go over here. Try not to, when you're done, have your strings facing down. I know you'll see Federer do that a lot, and even Gasquet, and he's hitting with Nicolas Mahut over here. You'll see Mahut do it, and I understand. I get it. But there are some things we should copy from the pros and some things we shouldn't. Just like there are some things we should copy from LeBron James when we're playing basketball, and some things we shouldn't try to copy from him. So one of the things that you can copy is this position, that left side of the V position. If you're struggling with the amount of control you have in your one-handed backhand, all the things we talked about, grip and dropping and closing the racket face, swinging low to high, but this position right here is just a game changer. And here's a good view of that high one-handed backhand I was talking about. You'll notice, look at his racket is not that closed. It really isn't. When you are dealing with a high one-handed backhand, you're typically not going to be swinging up as much as you're hitting, but the swing is a bit more across. And you can see that he's actually contacting with the racket above his hand. So he's bypassed the upward part of the swing, and now the swing is going to be a little more left to right as he's hitting the ball. And so you can see that. And you can see that reflected in the finish as well, where the racket is a little bit now more to the right of his hand. You can really see the left hand go backward, keeping the chest to the side. This is a great view of this. Remember, I talked about dropping with both hands to help you close the racket face. But in this situation, look where his left hand is now. And now look where it is, how it goes back. And that's to counteract the forward movement of the racket. So the left arm goes this way, zero net force, body stays sideways. Love, love, love this one-handed backhand, this high one-handed backhand. So you're not going to be swinging up as much as you're hitting the high one-handed backhand. There's a little, just anatomically, the racket's not going to go up as much. It's going to be going more across at this point. And it doesn't matter that he's off the court right now and that he's trying to hit the ball this way. It's that type of swing, even if you're in the middle of the court. But you can see he does not keep the wrist angle intact on this high ball, which is normal. I mean, here it is, but he doesn't. I understand he has that position, but that wasn't part of the swing anymore. It was like long past that because he swung so much across. But yeah, he's just coming back to the ready position. All right, let me show you this in front of the camera and how you can practice and improve your one-handed backhand. So the first thing is the grip. So you want to get your racket, and you can do this while you're, hit pause right now while you're watching this video so you can grab your racket. You want to put your racket on its edge. You've got an octagon, and the top flat side, that flat panel, it's called a bevel, but that flat panel on the very top is the Eastern one-handed backhand grip. So we're going to take the base knuckle of our index finger, and we're going to grab onto the top of the racket. You can see my racket's on its edge. I'm going to grab onto the top of the racket, and that knuckle is going to be on the very top. Now, there's some play that we can have where we pivot that knuckle on that top bevel. I could be like this, I could be like this, and it's still with the knuckle on panel number 1. So the more perpendicular your fingers are, the more you're going to be like Gasquet. Now, what I like to teach is really the base knuckle of the index finger and the heel pad on panel number 1. That's a very classic Vic Braden way to hold the racket. If you want to copy the way Gasquet is hitting his backhand, which might give you a little more topspin, what you can do is you can take the heel pad that is normally covered and on bevel number 1, and you can move your hand a little bit to expose that heel pad just a little bit. Don't go crazy and have all 4 knuckles on the very top. Just have a little bit of that heel pad off the racket. You'll still have a trigger finger, but what it does is it might just put the contact point out a little more out in front than you normally use, and you're going to get more spin because of that. The second thing, the turn. By the way, I've got the Topspin Pro. Do you know I'm contacted by so many companies about, hey, promote our product, or would you like to be an affiliate? And I get the product or they send it to me and I'm just not impressed with it. There's a reason why I share the Topspin Pro with so many of you in so many videos, because this is an amazing product for my students, for at home, for showing you with demonstration, for the videos. This is an amazing product. Go in the affiliate link below and grab yourself a Topspin Pro. So when you take your racket back, you're going to turn, and a couple things are going to be true. One, you'll have changed your grip when you take your racket back. So you're in the forehand grip, ball comes to you, you kind of hide the grip change during the turn. The grip change, by the way, isn't so much that you turn your hand as much as it is you use the other hand and you turn the racket. So you turn the racket to actually bring the panel over to the knuckle rather than thinking the knuckle over to the panel. You take the racket back. Now, Gasquet had a very bent hitting arm. What I would suggest to you is that you have this arm straighter. The reason why is when people are bent in their hitting arm prior to hitting the one-handed backhand, they tend to go straight to the ball, almost like they're Michael Jackson doing the Beat It dance in the song, in the music video. But what we really want is we want the racket to go down and then the arm straightens. So what you can do is have this arm a little straighter on the take back than Gasquet, and you'll see Federer with a very bent arm. Have the arm a little more extended. It can take pressure off the elbow and that you're not straightening it as you hit the ball. It's more of a shoulder movement. It also makes it just more likely that you're then going to drop the racket down in the back. When you take the racket back, and you remember with Gasquet, he took it back and his hand was very far apart. His arm was apart. I want you to pull this arm in against your body. If you had like a playing card, I wonder, let me see if I have like a pen. Well, I don't want to get some on my shirt, but I'll just close it up. Here we go, I got a pen. And if I put it like on my pec, when Gasquet turned initially, it wouldn't be pinned in against. But I can take my arm and I can put this pen right here and I can pin it up against the arm and the chest so it stays there. If I go out, it falls out. If I pull it in, it stays in. So kind of feel like that. Kind of feel like that arm is pulled in against your body. Back elbow is up, strings are facing to the crowd. So that's how I want you to take the racket back. And by the way, just film yourself. Film yourself to see if you're doing this. Like, don't just wonder. Film yourself hitting backhands, just like Gasquet was filmed, and you can film your backhand, review it, and see if you're doing this. Then the racket is going to drop. Here's the key. Don't drop with one hand. Drop with two hands. What I like to tell my students is take the back of your non-hitting hand and touch your knee. So my left hand, I'm right-handed, so my left hand's on the throat, and I'm going to touch my left knee. I'm actually taking the racket down, racket closed, then I can brush up the back and arms go apart. Now it is storming outside. We have this big windstorm, thunder, lightning outside, so I can't film outside today. But here I am in my basement doing my best, and the racket's going to drop, touching my left hand, or sorry, my left knee. Then my arms go apart. Now again, I've got the ceiling here because I'm indoors, but I'm going to try to brush up the back, and my arms then go apart. And Gasquet would kind of let the racket go over to his right, but then he'd fix it. I want you to see if you can just keep it to the right the whole time. If it goes a little bit to the right, especially if it's a really high contact, then you can have it be more across. I understand that. But on the lower ball, we really want to go up and lift that ball. You'll see my arms go apart. You can see the ball spinning. That's the beauty of the Topspin Pro, is you can feel what it's like to really spin that ball, and you get the visual cue and confirmation that you actually did it correctly. Let me show you this from the side. I really want you to understand the one-handed backhand. Grip change. Turn like you got that pen between your pec and your arm. Pin it. Back elbow is up because when the elbow drops, the racket opens. It can make the swing bigger and it can make it tougher to close the racket. So you want that racket very straight up and down. We drop with both hands. We brush. This is when you let go with your non-hitting hand, by the way. It's when you get to that back knee. You brush up the back, then the arms go apart. The arms go apart as a power source. When this arm goes this way, this arm can go this way. By keeping the body sideways, I can swing my racket toward my target, and then I go back to the ready position. So the one-handed backhand, it's a beautiful stroke. I enjoy hitting it. It's not what I use. I use a two-handed backhand. But the one-handed backhand is just such a pretty and almost there are a couple of pictures of Federer in that ballet pose, and they actually have like a ballerina next to him. I don't know if you've ever seen that on social media, but it's such a pretty stroke. But it can also be frustrating if you don't have the fundamentals. So get the grip, get the turn, get the drop and the closure of the racket face, swing up the back of the ball. Try to keep the racket on the appropriate side of the V on your hand. And if you do this, and if you go out and film yourself and make sure you're doing this, there's no doubt you're going to gain confidence, win more matches, and play much better tennis. This is Ryan Reedy from 2minutetennis.net. You got this.